one of the guys who's been covering it on top of it all day, all off season, all season long. Chip Patterson in the CBS Sports family. You can catch the Cover 3 podcast as well as his work at cbssports.com. The big news. So Friday morning, I wake up.
Yep.
I'm walking my kid back from daycare. I'm reading the stuff, what's going on. Okay, Oregon and Washington, they're going to stay. Arizona's going to stay. A little bit later, all of a sudden, they're going to the Big Ten. What? Shortest question ever. I guess I'll just ask you, like, what? What happened?
So it was dizzying, right? Like the fact that we've got, the Big Ten is now advanced exploring on Oregon and Washington. And at one time, Cal and Stanford were in there, but then based on the reports, it seems like that had fallen away. The current appetite for expansion for the Big Ten university presidents was going to be limited to 2. Former Commissioner Kevin Warren, we know, had identified Oregon and Washington. And look, like, outside of their, Pacific Northwest location, from a university perspective, what kind of universities they are a fit for the Big Ten. They are AAU members, that prestigious crew of universities, which is something that the Big Ten does value still. But, you add USC and UCLA, and now all of a sudden you start to, think about what the Big Ten footprint is a little bit differently. So before I get to the dizzying side, what I think eventually brought the Big Ten around, if you were not in on expanding past 16 for 2024, because remember, this is going to happen next year, that it was the idea that you're getting a sale. I mean, you are getting a bargain. Like you are going, and like, Bart, I don't know if you've ever been an open box shopper, but sometimes just because there's a tiny little dent in the side, the TV still looks good when I plug it in, right? I'll take the discount right there. And I think in Oregon and Washington, they found universities that they already favored, universities they'd already vetted, and they understood that because of the disarray of the Pac-12, they would be able to get them without having to pay out the full share. And I think that is why some of those other universities came around on the idea. And if you were against further expansion, you were adding valuable properties, you were expanding the reach of the Big Ten, and you are doing so at a discount. And I think that's what this ultimately comes down to. I mean, Oregon and Washington did hold the fate of the Pac-12 in their hands. If they had come out to that grant of rights meeting on Friday morning and said, we're in, then I think everything else, for the most part, and we can get to the, some other pieces of it. I think that for the most part, most of those other universities would have said, okay, we're in too. Instead, as it's been reported, minutes before the meeting starts, Oregon says, hey, we've talked it over. If the Big Ten invites us, then we're going to take it. And we think that might happen. Then the day plays out. Now Oregon and Washington will be in the Big Ten in 2024. A lot to figure out on that front.
Chip Patterson's here, Bart Winkler, and for Zach Gelb. And when you talk about the footprint, you talk about like they're a good fit, right? I'm still trying to get to a point where like,
it's big state school with that are good state schools. They
I agree.
A bunch of alumni. They invest in research. They are considered, strong academic universities. They just happen to be in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, the Big Ten is there, right, and these schools are way over there. And I think while realignment has happened a lot in college football in the last 30 years, I mean, 30 years ago, all the Texas schools were in the same dumb little conference, right? So a lot has changed. I still, as a fan, I still like the regional aspect of it, building these rivalries and all that stuff. But that is dead. That is gone.
Yeah.
And dead. Like the Big Ten in terms of, it's running in October and windy and, the phrase Big Ten football, what does that even mean anymore?
Yeah, it won't. And that's just something that is, man, it stinks, right? Like on the level of sort of big picture stuff, I also love the idea that college football is held so sacred by so many people in all parts of the country because of the regionality, the proximity, the fact that whether you go to work and your coworker went to your rival university because you're in the same geographic area, or you're going to church and everybody's talking about what just happened on Saturday night or in Saturday, and everything is drivable. You can even go to some away games. Like that is gone. And that connection is something that I think is going to be lost as we enter into college football's new era. But I'll tell you what, the product is still being consumed. Like college football, somebody did a great point. I think it might have been Andy Staples, Vaughn 3. He was talking about the helmet schedules, right? Like if you just slap Oregon and Penn State on a helmet schedule, a college football fan says, heck yeah, I'll watch that. You know, and it isn't that I'll go to that. And there's not historic rivalries, but it's Penn State and it's Oregon. And that's exciting. And it is helmet schedules that are the future of college football. It is trying to put together title fights. What are you going to promote? What is each side going to bring? And to look at the future Big Ten, I just mentioned, Oregon and Penn State. That is something that would be an exciting game that the college football fans everywhere would want to be involved with and watch. And so I do think that the future of the sport is not being hurt by all of this realignment, but really at the core of it, there is something that's being lost.
There are a lot of questions about this, and I think there's, a lot of the same questions are going to be asked, and a lot of people have the same questions. I got kind of two for you, like long-term E. One, you look at the Big Ten and you look at the helmet schedules. And I thought about this with the SEC too. Like the SEC is adding Texas, adding Oklahoma.
I mean, Texas LSU as a conference game is massive.
I know, but then at some point, like the Big Ten's like, we have a lot of these really good schools. We have Rutgers. SEC's like, we have a lot of these schools. We have Vanderbilt. Would there be like a scenario that these teams sort of like, you're not like, now that we're this, you're not that anymore? Would there be some of that you see in the play? Because it's almost like Big Ten's going to be Big 20. Well, at some point I just envision, the conference is going to break up again and this cycle will go forever.
No, someone's got to take losses. My colleague Bud Elliott on the Cover 3 podcast says you take the checks, you take the losses. That there are roles, just because and I will say that the top dogs at the top don't want to break away because then you're taking more losses, right? You are able to establish your dominance and be able to go out and beat your chest and talk about how great you are, in part because of those 3 or 4 games against teams at the bottom of your conference. So, and I think those schools at the bottom of the conference are very happy to take those checks and be able to invest those in their athletic departments and be able to say that you've got a seat at the table. And a lot of this does come down to the pride at the university level, at the athletic department level, that you are competing at the highest level. I mean, that's what you see some of the consternation around Florida State is this existential dread that you are playing in a JV league and that will be held against you in your pursuit of competing for national championships. And so whether it's joining another conference or doing whatever they can to get out of the ACC, the reason why you hear so much, the reason why you hear so much is because they're trying to, fire everyone up for this eventual exit. Like I feel like Bart, don't you feel like real realignment happens quietly and quickly? It doesn't happen over extended periods of public board meetings. It's always the executive session is when you get the good stuff. But that's beside the point. The point of the matter is, I believe that you are not going to see Northwestern or Rutgers or some of these programs or that are at the bottom of the conference in the pecking order. You're not going to see them get squeezed out because the conference is always going to want to have programs that you can get wins against competitively. What might happen is that some of those programs might decide that they don't want to play big ball anymore, right? Like if we turn our college football players into employees and now you're having to start pay them. Like I think there are schools that are in the power conference right now that would have very tough decisions. And maybe as a university would be like, you know what, that's fine. Like we're going to go, if there's going to be a breakaway, like we've got FBS and FCS, but what if there was FBS plus and it was everybody that's going to pay the players as employees? I think there are schools that are in power conferences right now that would just decide to hang back because they didn't want to play that game.
What about Chip Patterson here? Bart Winkler in for Zach Gelb, for Zach Gelb show, CBS Sports Radio. What about, like, it just feels the college football playoff was this great thing that expanded to get everybody in. I almost feel now that it doesn't need to be 12. If there's these 2 giant conferences and the other ones, I don't know. It just feels like
Well, it's great news for the American Athletic Conference. It's great news for the Mountain West, the Sun Belt. You know, like if all of a sudden there's,
the college football playoffs is going to be easier for some of these teams than their conferences.
So that is all we have agreed to is just the next 2 years. And with this conference realignment, one of the burning questions that will not be answered immediately, but that will be addressed is, hey, let's not do 6 automatic bids, right? Because the 6 automatic bids for conference champions is the way it's set up right now. And let's assume that any year that Notre Dame is able to win 10 games, they're going to find themselves in the playoff. That would make it 7. So if I'm the SEC or the Big Ten with all these programs that want to be in the playoff, they're going to look and be like, no, that's ridiculous. Why is Tulane in there and I'm not? Why is App State in there and I'm not? And I think that this conference realignment makes it more likely that when we enter the next phase of the college football playoff after 2024, after 2025, beginning in the 2026 season, that we will either expand that number from 12 to 16 and or we will lose those 6 automatic bids for conference champions.
Things are still very fluid. We're still trying to figure out how this is all going to shake up. Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, these other schools where they're deciding their futures. I'm not sure, even if you just look at Oregon and Washington and stop there, the fact that they're having the Pac-12 having a hard time getting a rights deal on TV when sports TV rights are like the one thing that networks are paying for. This conference, is dead. It died today.
It might have happened when USC and UCLA got plucked, that it might have been beginning with that, but this is a really, really tough time for Oregon State. And this is a really tough time for Washington State. And those each have been programs that, look, I'm based in North Carolina. I was born in North Carolina. I didn't know much about Corvallis or Pullman, but I've been working at CBS covering college football for 13 years, and I've learned a lot about Corvallis and Pullman. And there's people that care deeply about that. And those are athletic departments that could be facing a situation where their media rights payouts are now going to be like a third of what they were used to. What does that mean for their college football program? What does that mean for like their entire athletics budget and what's going to happen there? Really, really, I think Stanford will be fine. They'll find money somewhere, but it's, I'm thinking about the Oregon States, the Washington States of the world, and the fact that, the Pac-12, which has a long, long history, basically being pulled apart just by its inability to get all its members together under one media rights deal. It's been disappointing for sure for the traditionalist in me.
There's so much fallout with this. We have talked about it from a football standpoint. Obviously there's basketball, but cross country and soccer, and there's all these other sports that are a vibrant part of these universities. They've got no say in this. I don't know if it's good for them or bad for them. It's just that part's kind of messed up.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think that it has been pitched that if we do have some kind of big breakaway or like organization of the football programs aside from everything else, that maybe all the other sports do go back to a more regional conference model. And, similar to what we have, I know in, there's schools that compete in other conferences for hockey because their conference doesn't have sponsored hockey, or schools that compete in other conferences for lacrosse, or play at different levels. I could see something where some of the other sports end up getting more regional, conference type schedules rather than, tasking all of your sports to do all of the travel that's involved, because, we're talking about a Big Ten that goes from New Jersey to Seattle. We're talking about a Big 12 that's going to extend almost like Orlando on a Big 12, like Orlando on one side, all the way into the desert on the other. This is not something that you would want all of your sports, or it's not sustainable to have all of your sports on the road all the time, trying to play everybody.
Crazy stuff, Chip Patterson. Appreciate your coverage and your time as we try to make a mess of all this. I'm sure we'll talk again.
Sounds good. Y'all be well.